Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're diving into, well, a genuinely challenging and really vital conversation. It's about how Israel's narrative is shaped and perceived, both globally and right there within Israel itself.
Yeah, it's complex stuff.
Our main source for this is a pretty compelling YouTube video from the C14 channel. It features insights from Yousef Haddad.
Right, he's the CEO of Together Arabs for One Another.
Exactly. And our goal, like always, is to sift through what he's saying, pull out the key nuggets, maybe uncover some surprising fact, and help you understand the different perspectives Haddad presents.
And what's really illuminating here, I think, is how Haddad breaks down what he sees as this ongoing information battle.
The information battle.
He really highlights the, let's say, the intricate web of external pressures, but also the, well, sometimes surprising impact of internal discussions on how Israel is seen outside.
So connecting the dots between events and perception.
Exactly. We'll connect some recent events he talks about to the bigger, how these things either, reinforce or maybe challenge the existing stories out there.
Okay, let's kick things off then. There was this incident, got a lot of headlines, and our source material, Haddad, he humorously calls it the Selfie Flotilla.
Ah, yes, the Greta Thunberg venture.
That's the one. What actually happened with that? What was the immediate outcome?
Well, the basics are the flotilla, carrying climate activists, had to turn back.
Right.
Return to Barcelona. The official reason cited was severe weather.
Okay, weather.
But Haddad, in the video, he frames this with quite a bit of irony, almost like nature itself was, making a point.
Huh.
He jokingly called it one villo for the climate against climate activists. He sees a sort of poetic justice there, given their mission.
That's quite a take.
Yeah.
But Yousef Haddad goes much further than just the weather, right?
Yeah.
He really zeroes in on, well, what he sees as a lack of deep understanding among some activists.
Specifically Greta Thunberg, yeah. Regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
So what are Haddad's specific points about her knowledge, or, as he seems to argue, her lack of it?
He's very direct. He basically questions if she has fundamental knowledge of the region.
Like what?
Like, could she actually point to Israel or Gaza on a map, or name the important seas or rivers nearby? For him, this isn't trivial.
Okay.
It's sort of central to his critique of what he considers uninformed activism. And then he makes even more serious claims. He claims Thunberg took a selfie with Hamas terrorists. That's a direct quote.
Wow. Okay. That's quite an accusation from his perspective.
Absolutely. For Haddad, that immediately links her, in his view, with a group Israel designates as a terror organization. And there's more.
Go on.
He points to photos of her with what he specifically describes as a map of the land of Israel, but he implies it's a map that depicts the whole area as Palestine, effectively erasing.
So the visual itself is the message.
According to Haddad, a deeply problematic, overtly anti-Israeli message. And he connects all this to what he sees as a broader rise in anti-Semitism.
So Haddad's basically saying these actions, whether from ignorance or maybe intent, are really damaging. What does he propose then? How should Israel view and respond to these kinds of high-profile figures and their actions?
Yeah, this gets into the question of enforcement, or what Haddad sees as a lack of real consequences.
Right.
He reminds viewers that Thunberg was actually detained in Israel before, signed deportation papers.
I remember that.
Yet in his view, she just continues with similar activities, apparently not deterred. So Haddad argues for a much, much tougher stance from the Israeli.
Tough.
He specifically suggests the foreign ministry, the prime minister's office, should issue a, quote, clear threat, his words, basically saying if you come back, it's not just deportation. Next time you'll face a judge, potentially prison.
That's a significant escalation.
It is. His argument is pretty stark. He believes Israel's current approach, which he sees as lenient, actually ends up inadvertently fueling global anti-Semitism by not setting strong enough deterrence against those he perceives as actively working to undermine Israel's legitimacy. He thinks the current system just isn't working to protect Israel's image.
Okay, that's certainly a firm stance he advocates, prioritizing deterrence, clearly. So we've heard his take on external figures, this narrative battle, as he calls it. But then his analysis in the video takes a really interesting, maybe more uncomfortable turn. He argues some of the worst damage comes from within Israel.
Right. He talks about a recent journalists' protest.
Following a teacher's protest, yeah.
Yeah.
What was the core issue he had with these journalists?
Well, he focuses on this petition signed by, I think it was 131 Israeli journalists.
Okay.
And the petition called to stop killing journalists in Gaza.
Seems straightforward enough on the surface.
But Haddad interprets this very differently. He sees it as implying or outright accusing Israel and the IDF of intentionally targeting journalists.
Ah.
And he just flat out rejects that, calls the assertion idiotic. For him, it shows either, a deep misunderstanding of combat situations or maybe even a deliberate misrepresentation aimed at making Israel look.
That's a really strong charge against fellow Israelis. Journalists know. Did he give any specific examples to back this up? Maybe something visual?
He did, yeah. And it's a powerful and definitely provocative example.
Okay.
He shows an image of a journalist, names him as Hassan Nasrallah, someone he says received a journalism award.
All right.
But then he immediately contrasts that with another image. The same guy, Nasrallah, being hugged and kissed by Yahya Sinwar.
Sinwar, the Hamas leader.
Exactly. Widely seen as a key Hamas leader, often called an arch-terrorist by Haddad and in Israeli
So the juxtaposition is the point.
Precise. Haddad uses this stark visual contrast to seriously question the credibility, the judgment, maybe the misplaced solidarity of those Israeli journalists who signed the petition.
Implying they're defending someone linked to terror.
That's the implication, yeah. That by defending or not properly vetting people like Nasrallah, they are, perhaps without realizing it, uncritical, aligning themselves with figures tied to terror instead of sticking to impartial journalism. That's the hypocrisy.
Wow, that certainly makes his point visually, if controversially. So if these internal voices, as Haddad sees them, are making these claims, what does he argue the wider consequences are for morale inside Israel, soldiers, citizens, and also for Israel's image abroad?
He really doesn't mince words here. He argues these internal critiques aren't just, propaganda attacks. He thinks they have much deeper, more corrosive.
What?
He says they actively harm the morale of our soldiers, the ones on the front line, and more broadly, they damage the morale of the state of Israel.
Okay, internal impact. What about externally?
Crucially, he claims these actions directly promote anti-Semitism globally.
How does he connect internal critique to global anti-Semitism?
Well, from his unique position as an Arab Israeli defending Israel internationally, he finds it incredibly frustrating.
Right.
He says it's hard to explain to audiences abroad why Jewish journalists inside Israel would say things that seem to validate criticisms from external, often hostile sources.
So it undermines his own advocacy work.
That seems to be part of it. His conclusion is blunt. Any journalist who speaks against the state of Israel in a way that implies it intentionally harms journalists is, quote, a disgrace and a shame. He's deeply concerned about national unity and how
that really underscores the impact he believes this internal dissent can have. Okay, so this talk about critics inside Israel leads us pretty naturally to another point Haddad raises in our source material.
The NGOs.
Exactly, the role of various non-governmental organizations operating within Israel. He mentioned one specifically, the OFAC Association.
Yeah.
What did he highlight about them?
Yeah, he brings up this viral video put out by OFAC. Now, this group says it promotes democracy, Jewish, Arab part. Sounds good.
On the surface, yes.
But Haddad points out this specific video graphically depicts over 18,000 children in Gaza dying in the fight. He notes it went viral. And he also points out something he finds problematic. A logo for Channel 12, a major Israeli news channel, was apparently mistakenly in the video.
So that suggests either carelessness or
maybe, Haddad implies, an attempt to lend it some false credibility. His main point is that despite their stated mission of peace and partnership, the actual content they produce can be, in his, deeply biased and damaging.
So he's clearly bothered by this specific video from OFAC. What's his bigger picture view, then, on these kinds of organizations generally? What does he think their ultimate impact?
His perspective is pretty firm, or quite critical. He basically labels many of them anti-Israel. Very. He says that even though they talk using language of peace, brotherhood, and unity, their actions and the content are, in his exact opposite.
And the damage?
He argues they cause immense international damage by generating these narratives, these specific statistics.
Like the OFAC video.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which are then picked up and used against Israel in international settings, universities, social media, maybe even political forums.
And he connects this to a broader trend.
Yeah, he links it to what he calls a wider progressive, and he sees this influence as having sort of infiltrated many Western organizations, shaping a global narrative that he feels is consistently and often unfairly critical.
Okay, that's a clear articulation of his worry about the impact these groups have.
Yeah.
But it does raise a question. If these groups genuinely believe in peace and unity, as they claim,
right,
what challenge does Yusuf Haddad throw down to them in the video? It seemed pretty stark.
Oh, it's very direct, almost visceral, actually. He essentially challenges their conviction, their bravery, maybe. He says, okay, forget Gaza for a second. Acknowledge it's a war zone. It's inaccessible right now. Fine. Instead, he says, go to cities like Jenin or Ramallah, Palestinian. One, he notes, is actually quite developed, accessible.
Okay, go there and do what?
His challenge is that go there, try to raise an Israeli flag next to a Palestinian flag, and make a public call for unity and brotherhood right there in the street.
And his prediction?
It's bleak. He predicts they'd have seconds, not minutes or hours, to get out of. Or, worst case, he says, they might end their lives there.
Wow, that is stark.
It is. For Haddad, this thought experiment, this challenge, highlights what he sees as a huge a gap between the nice-sounding rhetoric of some NGOs and what he believes are the dangerous reality, the deep-seated hostilities on the ground in certain...
He's basically forcing them to confront the potential real-world consequences of their ideals outside of a controlled, perhaps sympathetic environment.
That seems to be exactly the point he's making.
Wow, okay. That's a truly visceral challenge Haddad puts out there, isn't it? It really strips away the rhetoric and, demands a confrontation with what he sees as harsh reality. Makes you think.
Definitely.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. We've really unpacked these different layers of criticism and perspective around Israel. We went from international figures like Greta Thunberg and that Selfie Flotilla.
Right.
To his really strong condemnation of certain Israeli journalists.
The internal critique.
And finally, the controversial impact he sees from NGOs operating inside the country. All through the compelling lens of our source material, Yusuf Haddad's perspective.
Absolutely. And what this really shows, I think, is how every action, every statement, every piece of content, doesn't matter if it's from an activist abroad, a journalist at home, or an NGO.
Yeah.
It all contributes to, or maybe tracks from, a nation's narrative. Understanding these different views, even the really critical or challenging ones like Haddad presents, it's just crucial for getting a genuine...
It really is. The complexities of information warfare, the internal debates, feeding external pressures. It's all deeply intertwined.
Couldn't agree more.
Indeed. And for you, our listener, this brings us to maybe a final thought-provoking question to carry with you.
Okay.
How do these different kinds of advocacy, global climate activism on one hand, internal journalistic dissent, NGO work on the other, how does each shape national and international narrative? And maybe more importantly, what are the consequences, both intended and maybe unintended, of those efforts, especially when they happen in a place as complex and often volatile as a conflict zone?
That's a great question to chew on.
Something to mull over until our next deep dive.